Excuse me, if everyone can please take your seats. The chair of the Waterfront Planning Advisory Board would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you.
Thank you. What time is it? It's okay. I'm going to call to order the May 13th, 2013 Waterfront Planning Advisory Board regular meeting. It is about 6:12. In attendance, we have Robert Pilgrim, Dean Rendy, Roy Mann, Corey Walton, and me, the chair, Brooke Bailey. Our first thing is citizens communication. Michael, are we just going to wait for the Q&A for citizen communication?
There's no citizen communication.
Okay. And then the approval of minutes, if the board members would just look over the minutes from the April 22nd, 2013 regular meeting. And if I have a motion?
Yeah, move approval.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, for our new business tonight is going to be the presentation and Q&A on Imagine What the South Shore of Lady Bird Lake Could Be by John Fregonese. And I am going to introduce Alan Holt, who will spend about 3 minutes introducing the project and the people involved. Alan? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome everyone to the Waterfront Planning Advisory Board meeting. And I just want to give you a roadmap of what's ahead tonight. I'm going to take about 3 minutes to orient you. And I will then be introducing my colleague, Greg Kylo, from the Economic Growth and Redevelopment Services Office, which has been the lead city office for the Sustainable Places project. Greg will then introduce John Fregonese, who will be speaking and presenting the work that he's done on behalf of the Sustainable Places project. We'll also be hearing during that presentation from Dean Almy, who is the professor at the University of Texas School of Architecture. Dean is not only a professor there, he's the director of the graduate program in urban design, as well as director of the landscape architecture program there. And he is the founder and director of the Texas Urban Futures Lab. And you'll be hearing more about that. And it's an applied research arm of the School of Architecture program. And this spring, the Texas Futures Urban Lab, the Texas Urban Futures Lab, rather, has taken South Shore Central on as a project and coordinated with all of the work that will be presented tonight. I might also mention that Dean is currently a commissioner on the Design Commission, and he was formerly on the Waterfront Planning Advisory Board. So he's well steeped in all of the issues. After the presentation, the board, who is hosting the meeting this evening, will have an opportunity to question the speaker and delve in further. And then the chair will be opening up the questions from the audience. We'll have some microphones and some people circulating. She will recognize you and will come with a microphone. And because we're recording this so that other people who aren't here have the opportunity to see what's going on tonight, we'll ask that you wait for a microphone during that part of the evening. It's interesting that we, and perhaps appropriate, that we're here at the Hyatt for this meeting. We're smack in the middle of South Shore Central, and it was the development of this building in 1984 that created concern about the future of development along the lakeshore. And that led to the study, the 1985 Town Lake Corridor Study. This set out some fundamental principles and goals for waterfront development. This document is still the guiding document for waterfront planning today. It's a thick document. The Waterfront Planning Board is well steeped in this. Actually, Roy Mann, who sits on the board, was very involved in this study back then. And among the various recommendations and principles that were laid out in the 1985 study is the recommendation that from these principles, the lakeshore should be master planned. That's yet an unfulfilled recommendation. This led to the establishment, the creation and the establishment of the Combined Waterfront Overlay Ordinance in 1986, which originally established 15 subdistricts. We now have 16 waterfront subdistricts. South Shore Central is one of those subdistricts. And it also established an original Waterfront Planning Advisory Board, which was disbanded in the 1990s, but reestablished by council order about 3.5 years ago. Since then, the Waterfront Planning Advisory Board, among their many duties, has been looking to waterfront planning generally, and they identified South Shore Central as being a subdistrict that perhaps more than any others faces redevelopment challenges in the future. And because of that, they made an application to the American Institute of Architects pro bono public service project called the Sustainable Design Assessment Team Project. And Austin was one of 7 cities selected last year for an SDAT. You'll be hearing this term SDAT throughout the night. Many of you may have been involved in the SDAT, this pro bono public service arm of the American Institute of Architects assembled a team of national experts who made various reconnaissance visits to Austin and then came here and spent 3 days here last June and met with over 200 of you in various town meetings, stakeholder meetings, and so forth, and then issued some recommendations on how to create a framework for future development in South Shore that would especially increase public access along the shore, pedestrian access to the shore, and improved water quality through green infrastructure. All of these heralding and echoing key principles from the 1985 Town Lake Corridor Study. I mentioned that we've also taken the opportunity to connect with the pro bono services of the University of Texas through the Texas Urban Futures Lab. The work that you see in the back of the room is the work of the students from the University of Texas, and Dean Almy will be presenting a little later on as part of tonight's program. But all of this work really is coming together under the banner of the Sustainable Places Project. And Greg Kylo, my colleague, I'll introduce to talk about this. And before I let the microphone go, I just have to say that not only have I had the pleasure of working with Greg Kylo, but a battery of hardworking public servants from staff from the Watershed Protection Department, from the Planning Department, from EGRSO, from the Parks Department. And it's hard to single out any person, but I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Sylvia Leon Guerrero in the Urban Design Division, who has done yeoman's work and is actually the brains behind this operation. But without further ado, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Ellen. I will echo Ellen's comments on Sylvia's great work. Let's see. Okay, so the Sustainable Places Project is a project of the CATS Consortium, which is a consortium of all of the regional planning entities, transportation providers, principal cities, nonprofits, and several research units of the University of Texas. Chad Coburn, the project director, is here somewhere. I saw him, as well as Betty Voigt, the executive director. And we specifically want to thank them for sponsoring this evening, the refreshments and the venue. There's also quite a number of partner team members and consultants here tonight. Too many to acknowledge, but I'm sure they will tell you all about their work if you talk to them later. Okay. So the CATS Consortium makeup mirrors the Federal Partnership for Sustainable Communities, which is a consortium of federal agencies. And the whole idea is to be silo busting and to get to results that couldn't be achieved if we were to stay in our individual disciplines. This project is supported by a $3.7 million HUD grant, a grant administered by HUD on behalf of the federal partnership. Our project is an implementation of the Campo 2035 Regional Transportation Plan and the 37 activity centers that it identifies. We have 3 strategies in the project, all of which are deployed tonight: public engagement, planning demonstration sites, and an analytic tool. The Austin Urban Rail Corridor is one of 5 regional demonstration sites that we'll be talking about a little bit later. And a key component of the project was development of this analytic tool. My director, Kevin Johns, brought the idea to the consortium and likened it to Web Loci for cities. Web Loci is a software tool that eGRSO uses to evaluate the return on investment of incentive packages to make sure that anything that the city is investing in a company is returned and then some to the city. And Kevin thought the idea of creating an analytic tool that would be similar, that would allow us to determine the return on investment of implementing Imagine Austin projects. So our department is the lead department for the project, but like the federal partnership and the consortium, we're working with a number of departments as well, as Ellen mentioned, and probably most significantly PDR tonight. This is the map from our demonstration site application. It is the urban rail corridor and several different alternatives that are being looked at. South Shore Central is outlined at the bottom of the map in blue. So it's a small part of our overall demonstration site, but a fairly important one. When we started looking at the analysis, the economic analysis we were going to do, we quickly came to the realization there was a lot of planning already done in this area. The East Riverside Corridor was just approved last Thursday. The Downtown Austin Plan a couple of years ago. The Capitol Complex, UT is working on their master plan, just released the Medical District Plan last week. And of course, Miller has had a master plan and is a good ways through implementation already. But when we started looking at the South Shore, we realized that there were still a lot of uncertainties about the project, and it made it difficult to do a forecast for the economic development when the actual entitlements and the ability to do things were really not very clear. So we brought some of the resources of the Sustainable Places project forward to be able to help with this effort. Kevin Johns challenged eGRSO staff to come up with what he called the Austin Factors, which is a series of economic development metrics that we're using in our urban rail analysis that we are currently working on and will be presenting soon. For next steps, we are proposing to be bringing our urban rail analysis to council in an August timeframe, followed by a regional forum that the project has been hosting. And then we anticipate we'll be continuing to work with the urban rail team through the alternatives analysis to support them as well. But the analytic tool also has some work to go. We are in our final year of the grant. But the tool, which is based on John Fregonese's Fregonese and Associates Envision Tomorrow, has been able to be enhanced through the grant, through our HUD grant, as well as leveraging a similar HUD grant in Salt Lake City. And we've built a number of unique components to the tool locally as well that we're quite proud of and we're bringing forward. And before the end of the grant period, at the end of this year, we believe we'll be bringing forward some very exciting parts. One of my goals from the beginning was to make the tool or some version of the tool very accessible to the public and easy to use. And I'm happy to say I think that we've made a lot of progress. We think we're going to have a very robust online presence that will allow anyone, whether they have software resources or hardware resources, anyone with a computer and internet connection should be able to use this tool in some form. And the other thing was I really wanted to see some kind of 3D visualization component of the tool. And there's some very exciting progress being made there too that we're hopeful by the end of our grant period we'll have something very exciting to show. But tonight is about South Shore, and so we want to get on to talk about South Shore. And I have the distinct pleasure of introducing tonight's feature speaker, John Fregonese. John is no stranger to Austin. He was a lead consultant along with Peter Calthorpe for Envision Central Texas about a decade ago and taught at UT while he was here. John began his career as a public sector planner in Oregon and rose to the director of planning for Metro Portland before leaving to form his own firm in 1992. Since that time, he's become very well known nationally for his work in regional visioning and scenario planning, and is very much sought after, so we're very thankful to have him on our project. It's been a distinct pleasure to work with John for the last 2 years or so, and on the Sustainable Places project. So please help me in welcoming John Fregonese.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to be here. I do work all around the country, but Austin is one of those special places. I love to come here because, after work, there's always a group of friends that will take me out and show me a good time. So it's a place that when you do that over and over again, you start to feel like it's more like home and so forth. Although it's not, I think it's something that I have a special connection with. As Greg mentioned, this is part of the Sustainable Places project. I think he's been quite complete on that, so I'm going to go through there. But there is one distinction. The other Sustainable Places projects, like Hutto, they're basically doing planning. They're building scenarios and picking a plan. Many of these are going to implement the plan that comes out of it. Tonight, we're going to show you plans that have been created by others that we're analyzing on a consistent basis. A couple of reasons for that. First of all, I think this is probably the most studied 80 acres in Central Texas. A lot of ideas have been proposed. A lot of plans have been done. And just in the last year, you've got both the SDAT and the UT plan. And we want to look at that. And I think it's really important to look at that before you move ahead. Secondly, is to understand some of the depth of the options by going into the tool. So we're going to talk about 3 scenarios tonight. One is the base zoning. What happens if you don't have a plan? What do you get? So we're doing an honest build-out of your current zoning and regulations to see what you get. Now, I'll give you a little spoiler alert. It's not that bad. It's not a disaster. Your zoning actually puts in place several principles that would be implemented that would help things out there. But it's not what you want. I think I can fairly say that. We're also going to look at SDAT and the UT Studio to look at some options. Part of the basis of this is really to introduce the concept of scenario planning, and it's something that is very powerful, is used a lot in industry. It's actually, there's a great Wikipedia entry on scenario planning that, of course, it's true. It's in Wikipedia. But it's interesting. It was invented by the military. It was invented to do war games. Prussian military decided instead of going out and making all these mistakes in the field, let's try different things. And rather than just talk about what would happen, let's go actually and try it. So actually every military in the world has full-time scenario planners all the time. Basically petroleum, stock markets, all kinds of people do full-time scenario planning all the time. Planning traditionally has been a master plan. And so it's like you're doing a plan you're building a house for somebody. They know what they want, and you're gonna go out and get a permit and build a house. That's a falsehood. The larger an area, the more complex an area, the less you can really depend on all of your assumptions to come true. You just don't have control of a lot of things when you're doing a public plan. Scenario planning is much more realistic. It's called contingency planning because you're saying, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we did that? You might come up with a master plan or vision, but often, especially when you're doing a regional plan where you have no government entity has any power to influence or to actually adopt it like you do as a city, you come up with strategies. And I found as a city, when we're doing city plans, and while we do regional plans, we do a lot of small area plans that get for implementation. Understanding those contingencies, understanding those strategies that work allow you to be flexible, to take opportunities that weren't anticipated, and to make the most out of them. And that's the power of scenario planning. One of the problems with scenario planning is that it really depends on an accurate model. I mean, if you're a military, you spend a lot of money taking your ships and your troops out and pretending to go to war. We can't do that. We depend on computer models, and most scenario planning today, a lot of even the war games is done using computer models where complex behaviors, complex interactions can be accommodated in a computer. When we did Envision Central Texas, it was one of a few scenario plans. It's actually started at a regional scale. Now scenario planning has become kind of the hula hoop of planning. It's the craze that's sweeping the nation, I suppose. But people talk about scenario planning. Not everyone does it right. They make a mistake by getting too attached to their scenario too soon, and by trying to have their favorite scenario win, opposed to everyone. You know, really, when you're doing scenario planning, you're testing alternatives. You don't care any scenario wins or loses. You're trying to find out what happens. Your purpose is to be surprised, not to have your predilections reinforced. Your purpose in doing it is to be surprised and learn. And that's a really important part, and hopefully that's something that we'll find out tonight, that there's something new. Since then, we've done scenario planning across the United States. As I mentioned, lots of people have done it now. There's federal guidelines, there's state guidelines, there's all kinds of things. They all follow more or less the same tool about doing a base case or a trend, which is what happens if we do nothing, and then coming up with feasible alternatives. We don't want to do a Star Trek alternative where everyone has teleportation and we boldly go where no man has gone before. But we have feasible alternatives that are then modeled so that complex interactions can be understood, and you can understand, and also that you can see the results. And of course, as Greg mentioned, this was done here before. Envision Central Texas has been through this at a regional scale. These series of scenarios taught us a lot about how this region should grow. Basically, it's one of the ways that you came up with those 37 activity centers. That was a strategy. It wasn't any of these scenarios that were really running. It says, you know, as much as we can get activity centers to work, we're going to be better off in a whole bunch of ways. So let's invest in activity centers and do the best we can. So Envision Tomorrow was our software. When I was at Metro Portland, we had to write software in an old, an ARC info. It was very difficult to do. When I left and started Envision Utah, the first project, we had to port that to a desktop computer. After a couple of years, we wrote a version of it and then rewrote it. And basically, when we came to this project, we gave up rights to it and said, we're not in the software business. We'd rather have our colleagues using it. We wanted to make this basically a platform that everyone could use for scenario planning, so you didn't have to worry about the technology, the techniques. All the other scenario planning tools are proprietary. You don't know what's in them. They're hard to modify. This was intended to be easy, flexible, very easy to modify. And in fact, it's been proven there are many people in the audience tonight that are better at Envision Tomorrow than I am. Sylvia is especially remarkable. Greg, Alan, they all have done contributions and ideas, and that's the whole idea. The reason that you want to do this is computers allow you to understand complex interaction, complex phenomena more than you could otherwise. For example, you can find a bunch of bones of Triceratops, Tyrannosaurus Rex, and until they were modeled, we thought they stood up tall like in King Kong. I don't know why. They didn't. It was impossible to do that. You put the muscles on the bones, and a computer will tell you how they must have walked. You can look at climate change, and you can model the climate. You can look at building a car, a tricycle. You can look at interactions at the molecular level, things you could never see otherwise allow you to do that. The same way, wouldn't it be great if we could do a plan and then actually live in that city and understand what it would be like and not have to actually live through our mistakes? Wouldn't it be nice to make our mistakes ahead of time? That's what Envision Tomorrow is about, is to try to get basically an understanding and to really model not just the way it looks, but the way it performs in a variety of levels. of course, we have that Sim City. I don't know if you've ever played this game. I hate it, but because it's not a real simulator, but it is something that for some reason thousands and millions of people will sit down and pretend to be planners because they get to see the outcomes. And one of the points of this is to do just that. The partnership that we have created with these two universities and the researchers there is to allow them to put their findings into the software so that they can be accessed by everyone. So it's an expert system. You don't have to be an expert on transportation and land use and sustainability. The information is there. The results of all the peer-reviewed studies are in formulas that are operational, and all you have to do basically is put in the right information. You get all this great data out that has very good backing. That couldn't be done by a consulting firm or just one group of people. It's a crowd of people that are helping with that. So it's about spreading that technology and bringing that technology here. And that technology, I think, will have a home in Central Texas for a long time to come. There are a lot of grad students that are going to be coming out of school, going to work, carrying a copy of Envision Tomorrow in their back pocket. I'm sure the first thing they're going to do is install it in their office. It's different than other types of planning tools because it gets down to the building level. And that's one of the things, I'm going to get technical here for a minute, but it's one of the things that really is unusual about this and very powerful is that we start by building buildings. And we do that with a simple spreadsheet. Now, it's not too simple anymore, but it's a spreadsheet that you can go in Excel and you can use it in a simple way. It allows you to test the buildings and you understand. You put in basically zoning, height, setback, how many stories, what's the landscaping requirement, so forth. And then what's the parking requirements? It calculates how big you could possibly make it. Basically, it builds a building for you, and you can change it on the fly from 1 story to 10 story. You can change the parking requirements, so forth. It calculates that out. Then it puts it through a pro forma. You know how much it costs to build that per square foot, how much it costs, how much you can get for rent, and it'll tell you if it pencils. I don't know if many of you are in the planning or development game, but it doesn't pencil, or your plan is not financially feasible. Is something you hear all the time. This gives you the ability to look at that pencil and understand it, and to understand the business plan behind it. And frankly, any kind of a master plan that has a good business plan behind it will implement itself. If you have a master plan that's not financially feasible, there's no incentive for the private sector to do any of it. None of the good things will come out of that. It'll just sit there. There's many plans around that sit on the shelf because they don't do that basic. The other thing, it allows you to realistically visualize what's going to happen, and you can look at scenarios other than just saying, this spot near your neighborhood went from an orange to brown, and sometimes it's purple. People are going, what are you talking about? You know, what they mean is something like this. You can kind of start evaluating it. This plus data allows you to really understand that. So it has this return on investment financial tool. We then assemble that into development types. Basically, you assemble different kinds of buildings into development types with amenities. What kind of street system? What kind of parks? Is it a neighborhood? Is it a downtown? And then you can put that into and paint it on a screen. So that point is you paint it on the screen and you see changes on the fly. You can say, well, I'll put this in here. How many more people does that accommodate? What's my impervious surface? Did vehicle miles traveled go up or down? Are more people walking or less? All kinds of things. What's the city going to make? Is the city going to pay more in taxes, or is it going to make more in taxes than it requires in services? All kinds of things come right back at you instantly as you do it. And then you get evaluation. We'll get into this. Sometimes it's, frankly, when we go out to the public, you cut it down to, 6, 7, 8 really key evaluations. But, there's about 60, I think, and probably more coming out, information pieces that you get out of this. As time goes on, you'll get even more. And the nice thing is now it's working in the office. So we've modeled, we've done scenarios for their global greenhouse gas emissions compliance. For Southern California, that's 35,000 square miles. That's the size of Indiana, and a population of 22 million people. So it handles big data sets. On the other hand, we were at Hutto, And we were running it off a laptop right at the table, and as people were making changes, we were able to tell them what their plan was doing. And as Greg mentioned, we have a proof of concept up on the web. It's expected in 2 months or so. This scenario tool will be up on the web. You'll be able to go in and paint things differently and be able to see what happens. And part of this is, and Greg is the one that really drives this. There's something called City Engine, where you can take a colored map, like a very, very compatible, and Vision Tomorrow outputs are compatible with this, and you can put it into City Engine, and it will build a city that you can then fly through. This is an automatic system, and it even has findings to, has data sets, so you can pick the architectural style, you can pick the year, you can pick all kinds of things and be able to see the city. Now, of course, this wasn't done for planners. This was done for a much more lucrative market, which is gaming. But nevertheless, that technology allows us to put our scenarios into it, and probably given that it comes from gaming, I'm sure you could steal a car and drive through it and have an adventure, meet people, probably do a virtual reality. It might just really take off. At any rate, so you get a bunch of information from this. You get basically land consumption, how much of the development is from infill, how much is vacant land, the kind of housing mix, and how well does that housing mix match the needs and desires of your population. And we find, we've done a lot of this work, a lot of plans are way off. Sometimes people only want rich people to live in their town. Even if they're modest, they only want rich people, and they think that rich people all want big houses on big lots. So they'll have a community, and they probably have a city manager with brand new degree that says, if we only have rich people who don't have children live in our community, our taxes will be great. Of course, that's not the way you build a community. There's downfall there. You can't just look at the taxing side. But one of the things it does, it matches your population with the housing. So you can look at a population and say, both on the terms of income and preference, what kind of housing do you like, and make sure that your plan is matching that. Fiscal impact. And this is a UT Texas innovation, and so we have actually a Texas version of this that's specifically for Texas cities, where you look at how much income do you get from this in taxes? How much will the city have to spend in services? Are you at a net zero? Are you making money? Are you losing money? Building level sustainability. So we know how much energy is used, how much water is used, how much solid waste is produced, basically carbon emissions from buildings, and of course from transportation. So right now, to get most transportation numbers, you have to run a big transportation model. But there's been a lot of effort by these professors, actually among the leading ones, looking at the impact of how you live, of the kind of urban design you have and how people move around. It all makes sense, really, when you think of it. If you live in a place that has no sidewalks, that has a bunch of cul-de-sacs, there's no place to walk to, you don't walk very much. If you live in a place or work in a place that has those features, has lots of destination close by, you tend to walk more. And there's a lot of things that do that. So we get basically a lot of transportation information out of the model as well. And I'd like to kind of diverge here just for a minute to talk about some key findings. Everybody thinks, and planners are some of the worst in here, the way to reduce vehicle miles traveled and to get people to walk more is to increase density. And if you look at that, if you double housing density, it reduces vehicle miles traveled by 4%. And it increases walking and transit uses by 7%. So but you have to double density to do that. It's a linear relationship. It's called an elasticity. Well, if you double commercial density, you get that again. If you change the land mix, though, if you make areas that have a mixture of commercial and residential uses close together, you get a 9% in density, a 15% increase in transit, 12% in walking. It's twice the impact of increasing density, and yet you won't see studies or people coming out saying, "Gee, we need to increase the mix." No, increased density is a lot of what you hear. Actually, if you look at the facts, This is much more important. It's a bigger deal. Diversity of land use, doubling the ratio of jobs to housing, doesn't do much for VMT within 1 mile, but it increases walking by 20%. So again, density doesn't have as much to do with that. Intersection density, going from a very, and actually this South Shore is really bad in terms of intersection density and walkability, to basically a more of a grid like you have in downtown, decreases VMT by 12%, increases walking by 30%. It's about 3 times more influential in VMT, 4 times more influential in walking than housing density alone. And finally, if you put employment and put the employment destinations together, putting places near employment by walking, by biking, by transit, by car, decreases vehicle miles traveled 4 times as much as doubling density. So doubling employment within that range has a big thing. Obviously, you want to use all those, and that's why you have a computer model, so you can use all the tricks to be able to meet your goals. Let's then go down to, I'm sure everyone's wondering, why is he talking about this? Why doesn't he talk about South Shore? It'll all become clear. Let's talk about South Shore. As was mentioned, there's been a lot of studies. They're hard to find online, which is kind of unusual for modern plans. You do get a hold of them, but it's not something that's really accessible, and it's really obviously pretty old-fashioned, the governing plans for this. There's been a lot of great thinking, but no change in the official documents. And it's interesting, the warnings that I find from 20 years ago. There's concern that the provisions of the City of Austin Land Development Code and Waterfront Overlay District are not adequate to guide development in a way that will fully achieve the goals of the Town Lake Corridor Study. That was in 1996. And of course you have the Communities by Design and they said, you know, a code is not a vision. So before we jump into the South Shore, I'd like to talk about that one word, vision. And what is that vision? And it is actually the most powerful and kind of a little bit amorphous thing that you can have as a planner, but without it, you're really lost. Now, with a name like Fregonese, you can bet I was raised Catholic, and the word vision to me used to conjure up, you know, it's a cloud, there's a voice telling you to do something either really painful or possibly fatal. And you're going to be, you know, in the lives of the saints. So that's not the kind of vision we're talking about. One of the best examples, I think, is Martin Luther King and his famous speech, where he spoke about the city on the hill, where children would be judged by the character of their skin, the character of the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. You know, he was able to really articulate that future so clearly and inspire so many. Everyone saw the same thing at the same time. Not everyone, but many people that followed him saw the same thing. I did. I understood what he was talking about. I was in my teens when that happened. And you can think about that many times. When you have something so compelling, you all see the same thing at the same time, even though it doesn't exist in the present. You start striving for the same thing. That's why vision's so important. You know, that happened in the Chicago's World Fair. The Chicago burned down. It was coming back in the 1880s. It was squalid. It was very successful economically. They decided to have a World's Fair and brought in the best architects in the world. And they created, their scenario was the White City. It was a beautiful place. It was electrified. It was clean. It had beautiful architecture. It was safe. It was lit at night. It was festive during the day. This changed the way American cities grew. 25% of the people in the United States went to that World's Fair. And from that point on, you could see cities striving to make plans. Chicago, not the only one. New York, all over the country, the City Beautiful movement was born out of that. And we have replicas all over the place. Your moonlights. There's things from all over. The fact that you have a Capitol Mall here. A lot of those things came from the fact we don't have to live in squalor. And cities were places where your life expectancy was much less than a city. People would die of cholera, yellow fever. The city of Memphis in the 1860s, a third of the population died one summer. In the United States, this is not the Black Plague. This is Memphis, Tennessee. And that the City Beautiful movement changed that with sanitation and with beauty. It really changed the expectation for American cities. There's something else that happened in 1939 in the World's Fair when the automobile was just coming along. There was this vision by General Motors of a city designed for cars. And it was a fabulous thing. And you know something? That's been part of our legacy since. That vision is still under the surface. And if you don't have another vision, that vision bubbles up. That's the default. You'll notice these great roads, never any congestion. You can't get on or off. There's no on ramp. But it works great. And it says a planned Midwest metropolis 20 years from now with freeways running through it. Look, it's South Shore right there. No, just kidding. And you know, that was really romanticized. And actually, it was very, people talk about the GM conspiracy. They were doing exactly what everyone wanted. And there's a really great little clip I'm going to play for you now called The Magic Highway. Disney, 1958, talking about what the future would be. It's interesting how much they got right. It's also interesting the lifestyle that was envisioned by
Both of our cities will change as expanded highway transportation decentralizes our population centers into vast urban areas. With the advent of wider, faster expressways, the commuter's radius will be extended many miles. America will someday be crisscrossed by a network of super-speed transcontinental motorways. Tomorrow's living in spacious, well-planned communities will be closely integrated with the highway system. In the private motor port, the family car is automatically washed, dried, and refueled. As father chooses the route in advance on a push-button selector, electronics take over complete control. Progress can be accurately checked on a synchronized scanning map. With no driving responsibility, the family relaxes together. En route, business conferences are conducted by television. On entering the city, the family separates. Father to his office, mother and son to the shopping center. These new forms of vehicles will bring about special purpose roadways. Office buildings will combine unique parking and elevator services. From his private parking space, Father will probably have to walk to his desk.
So it's what's interesting, you know, it was just how they got, you know, Skype and you know, GPS and all that right. The other interesting thing was how the whole goal was to never have to use your body again. You could be a brain on a plate and you'd be just fine, you know. And that whole design of, and you know, a lot of places are like that, to where you want to completely alleviate any reason to use a muscle. Even in an inadvertent twitch. And of course what happens is we started designing places without humans in mind at all. It was all car oriented. It was all the magic highway. And you get to the point where you're really crippled in terms if you want to go out. And in fact, this South Shore area is an example of some of that thinking where walking was just considered obsolete. And you know, I think it's kind of interesting to imagine how that could have happened so quickly and how bad that is, to where now, you know, we have to actually take time out of our leisure just to do exercise, and we know that most people don't get that exercise. In fact, it's become so funny that you kind of have some absurd situations where, you know, those guys are going to go work out on the Stairmaster, but, you know, where exercise is something different than your life. And of course, you have a really big problem with obesity. Now, a lot of that's diet, but a big part of it is activity. And I've read a number of studies lately that show active transportation is the best thing you can do to lose weight and to have healthy lifestyle, as opposed to people that have active transportation that walk. You know, you walk 20, 30, 40 minutes a day just as part of your daily routine. You're not competing with fun things and leisure to go and walk on a treadmill in a gym. That gets really boring. But, you know, if you have an active lifestyle, then your leisure can be truly things you enjoy. And designing cities so that they can be active is a big part of it. So I've been in planning now, 37 years. It's been amazing, the transformation. I've always preferred this. But the vision that people have now really is very much for an active, a place where people can walk, a place that people will have options, a place that is pleasant to be within and out of your car. It's not like people want to give up their car, but they do want those options to occur. Walkability becomes an almost essential part of any new development. This is kind of interesting. This is not the National Association for Radicals. This is National Association for Realtors. 2011, surveying new home buyers. In deciding where to live, indicate how important it would be for you to have each of the following within an easy walk. A grocery store, 75% want to be able to walk to the grocery store. In 2005, it was about 40%, and they didn't even ask the question before that. It wasn't even on the radar screen. Look at these other things: pharmacy, hospital, restaurants, cultural resources, schools, doctors' offices. Most people want to live in a walkable environment. And yeah, they want to own a car too, but that's less important. You've all read about how our youth are not driving as much. A lot of people not getting driver's licenses. So that means that we've got to change that part of it. Another big change is nature in the city, embracing nature in the city. It used to be that you had nature and you had the city, and they were distinct, and you would never mix the two. And nowadays, people really, I think the latest thinking is really to bring nature into the city and enjoy that natural systems in the city. They're not foreign. They're interwoven, and your city's habitable. And basically, you can connect to nature. Again, there's health benefits. There's mental health benefits. I'm working on a project in Chicago where there's doctors on this committee who are saying, we want to be able to write people a prescription for nature, that they can go and get a dose of nature because it's much better than Xanax or Prozac or something, is to give people, like you get a prescription for phys ed or physical therapy, you get a prescription for nature therapy. There's actually documented benefits. And I think the South Shore is one of the keys, one of the iconic places in the country because, someone rebuilt the bridge in a way that attracted bats. Now all of a sudden, this is a place that everybody comes to look at that. So let's get down to the South Shore here. As was mentioned, it's this area just south of the downtown. It's got beautiful views. It has recreation and open space. It's very heavily used. It's got, and talk about access to jobs, 75% of the region's employment is within 20 minutes. This is inherently a place where people are going to drive less and walk more and take transit more and bike more. Inherently, no matter if you have a dually and you want to park your pickup there, even if you live in South Shore, you're still going to drive less because it's just practical to do it. There's been a lot of community plans and goals that I think are uncertain, and I think we all have to admit that. How are you going to have access to the lake? How are you going to get affordable housing? Environmental performance, you have some good code, but how are you going to make that happen? Green infrastructure, walkability and bikeability, and fiscal balance. How's it all going to be paid for? Right now, it's a very auto-oriented, jobs-rich area. It's about 3.5 jobs per household. And the walking environment's not that great. I mean, basically, you have very poor connectivity. If you look at this area, 88 acres, you basically have 3 intersections. If you look at a similar area in downtown Austin, you have about 150 intersections. So in terms of the area that is connected, it's very difficult, and what's there hasn't really been designed with pedestrians in mind. Now, the access to the lake, which is really well used, is not really very formally done. It's not like you say, boy, if you're a stranger to this area, maybe this is by design, you don't really know that this is a welcoming place, but, everybody goes there. And so, I mean, this is a real community asset and a real opportunity to, with a very little bit of input, to have a great return. You're obviously making investments, and this is a great facility. I'm sure that solves the linkage problem and also is going to be just a great thing that people are going to talk about for a long, long time. We built one of these in Portland on the east side next to a freeway, between the freeway and the river. It's hugely popular. So let's go through this area. We've done a series of prototypes as part of this study. We built a library of, 40-some-odd buildings that work on the South Shore. And so we have calibrated that to actual rents that are being paid. We've calibrated it to actual construction costs. And we know what the returns on investment are. We know what land's going for. And I have to say, I mean, we're asked to do a lot of plans for places where nothing works. You know, in the South Shore financially, almost everything works. I mean, you really have a hot market here. And that's a good, and it also means you better not dally because you've had a recession. But if you want to guide some of these things, you have the energy. Basically, this place has energy. It has movement. So available rents are among the highest in the city. They're comparable to the downtown. You've got the views, the proximity to open space. This is very desirable, and that's going to be bid up. We've done a bunch of different buildings. For example, this is a Texas donut, a wrap where the building is wrapped around a parking structure. There's one on Riverside that was built similar to that. And you know, this design, which is very common, very popular, works very well there. You can spend up to $100 a square foot. It's like $4 million an acre and still make it work financially. There's another one, 8-story courtyard building. You don't have to do pressurized stairwells. It gets more expensive in construction costs, but you get even higher density. A 12-story high-rise, you get $250 square feet, dollars per square foot. This is really where you're trying to get up and get views, but there's none of that permitted right now. But I mean, I think those are all options that you have on the table you can play with. And sometimes they make sense, sometimes they don't. If you look at this, you can see that you go from 63 million an acre to 20 million an acre. You go 91 to 215 dwelling units an acre. There's a whole bunch of options there. And you can see rents are from $2 a foot, so that's $2,000 for a 1,000 square foot apartment, to $3,000. So that's quite expensive. And that's something to think about. So let's look at some of the options. The first thing we did was let's take your base zoning and build that out. Most parcels are limited to 60 feet height. The statement parcel is limited to a low square footage by ordinance. So although they have a 60-foot height, it's not practical to use it. Basically, it's a 2- or 3-story ordinance because the square footage is so limited by that PUD. The interesting thing is there's a lot of different layers that go over it. It took quite a while to sort out exactly what was permitted in the current code. There's land costs, and they vary quite a bit in terms of what's assessed. On top of that, there's setbacks. There's setbacks from the town lake, or not town lake, Ladyburg Lake, and from the creek. There's FAR limits that vary from parcel to parcel, floor area ratio limits. Some are very high. Right next door, they're very low. There's lot coverage limits. How much impervious surface you can have. And there's height limits of a variety of types. So you put all those together, you get and square footage maximums on top of that. I guess all those other things didn't limit it enough. You have that on top of it. And you know, basically we built that out, and you know, it comes out, it's not too bad in certain respects. You have basically your base, you currently have 58 intersections per square mile. That's the rate we use. It's like miles per gallon, intersections per square mile. Your current code requires those blocks to be broken up, so you go up to 100 per square mile, which is a lot better. This is the basic height, and basically this is how we built it. We've got some 17-story, 200-foot buildings on this site, 5-story buildings. You have big step backs here along the park, and 3-story buildings here, 5-story buildings there. So basically, we're going to show you first a building envelope. And we're always reluctant to show these because they're just boxes. And people misinterpret a building envelope, which is just an area within which you can build a building, with kind of a desire to have the Stalinist gray, featureless boxes. So we're not proposing these boxes. We're trying to show you what your ordinance is telling the world about what you can do there. So this is and actually Greg has over here a live Google Earth running to show this South Shore with these building envelopes. This is what your current code allows to be built, low, medium, and high on the South Shore. And then we took this and put these building envelopes in place and built what your code would allow, which is this, basically. The lake access is blocked by the statesman, so until that redevelops. When it does redevelop, there's no guarantee that you get a road through there. The urban sidewalk is only required at the building frontage. The building has to have an entry, but only on one street, and we put it on this street. The side street, which happens to be the road to the lake, eventually has no special characteristics required of it. Active building front isn't required on all streets. And if you look down at the bottom, you can see this is the kind of environment you're going to get. You know, it's not the end of the world, but you could do better. The urban sidewalk's only required along building edges. One of the big issues here is you don't have a master plan, and you just have math. And the math is good for getting the building setbacks and different things. You get a road through here, that's better than nothing. But the access to the lake, which is so important, and kind of getting a visual of where the lake is and having terminal views, all those things that make a great city, none of that's in there because there's nothing explicit. No one's done a drawing. You're going to see all kinds of drawings tonight. There's no official drawings. And I think that's something that we should talk about. The outcomes are uncertain for the public, and several projects are being built. Things are moving along. So let's look at the SDAT. They had a unified vision. They came up with significant open space. Easy to do. No one had to adopt it. Never went through a hearing. It's just an idea right now. But it was well conceived by a lot of people. As you can see when we start to look at the performance, it was conceived by a lot of people who've done a lot of development. Their instincts were very good. They went through that SDAT process of looking at these different ideas and coming up with a design very quickly. Basically, Greg, this was done in a few days, right? It was just 3 days. So this is 3 days worth of work. I mean, it's really good. And you come up with a bunch of ideas. Now, obviously, if you go through a public process, this is going to be modified. It's going to change. But just take this as a true scenario. What could happen? Something we can learn from. They added some more intersections and a more complete street system. So that was an improvement. And they also started to talk about how to do this in terms of improvements. They said, you know, you need some things you need to pay for. Extend the public improvement district south of the lake. Make sure that you have the way to pay for roads, parks, drainage, and so forth. All the people on that SDAT committee had done other projects. They remember that there's public infrastructure that needs to go in that the private sector is happy to pay for if you guys help finance it. Instead of saying it's a requirement for you to build this section of road when you build your house or when you build your property, let's just take care of the whole thing comprehensively and we'll pay into a public improvement district. A TIF, a tax increment district, whereas as you have new buildings, you can take some of that money and pay for the infrastructure that everybody agrees with. So this is the basic building envelopes. And it's interesting, opportunities are slipping away. There's this X with Barton Springs and Riverside that they were going to straighten out, and that really opportunity has kind of gone away because development's already started to happen that blocks it. So you'll live with that interesting X. This is the SDAT building envelopes. The buildings are a little taller. They're 8-story. You can see this is from the ridge looking down. There's a couple of buildings that are blocking the bottoms, but most of the view of the downtown is still pretty good. And again, this is the difference of a simple thing of saying we need access to the lake, creating this big open space there, and putting in the same buildings, you know, the same density, but designing around it, you get something that's much more, I think, desirable. And as an Austinite, I can now get to the lake, and it's a beautiful walk, and there's probably ice cream stores here. I can take my family out and enjoy this area, not just the lake, but the neighborhood next to it. And basically the lake access and those amenities are quite important, as well as the enhanced sidewalk. So look at the difference between the two. So as you'll see, we're going to go through the University of Texas aspect. We're going to go through the one, and then I'm going to come back and talk about indicators. Financially, they're almost the same. Financially, these two are almost the same. What a difference in basically quality of life, I would say. Very little changes that are insignificant with this kind of project make a big difference in the quality of life. So this is the UT Austin studio. I'm going to switch over, and Dean will come up and run through his project, explain it. But basically some 16-point towers. The point towers having very small square footages, so you get views, but not so much view obstruction. And again, they are the champions of connectivity, and you'll be able to see they actually have quite remarkable walking and low VMT. This is the building envelopes, and I'm now going to switch over, and Dean, if you would come up, and I'll let you go through your
This guy. Well, even though this was a test of the tool, which my students took very seriously, and it's based on scenario planning, I have to say that the students did try to win. So, what's interesting is that the students I have who are all graduate students, many of them already have professional degrees in some kind of design discipline. So I had landscape architects, planners, urban designers, and architects. And the intent was to really study the tool and see what was possible while working within the parameters of the tool in terms of return on investment and land use and all that sort of good stuff.